Chapter 2. Devil's Deceptions and Backrubs.
Because Allah afflicted Eve, all the women of the world menstruate, and they are stupid.
You may be wondering why Muhammad based his new religion on old Bible stories and why he found it necessary to alter them. Muslim scholars insist that the characters and events, at least up to the point of departure, are similar because Yahweh and Allah are the same God. Unfortunately, that makes less sense than the sun falling out of a chariot and angelic wings blotting out the moon. If Allah is Yahweh, simply translate the Old Covenant into Arabic and be done with it. We have proved that the Bible was not changed with the passage of time, so if it was divinely inspired, as Muhammad claims, it still must be true. But as we discovered in the last chapter, Muhammad was allergic to the truth. Apparently it didn't serve his interest. It's hard to imagine a man speaking more ignorantly or lying more transparently. The fact that Muslims are wholly reliant on his testimony for the entirety of their religion and the very existence of their God puts them in a precarious position. Islam is on life support, and we haven't even left paradise yet. Thus far, the Quran and Hadith have demonstrated that Muhammad wasn't very smart, and that his God wasn't any help. That should be evident by now. So lacking creativity and inspiration, Muhammad turned to the best documented, best known, monotheistic religion, Judaism, to make his personal quest seem religious. So far, so good. Team Islam usurped Jewish ideas, terms, names, characters, and events. Muhammad penciled himself in as a fellow prophet, as the lead act on the marquee. He cast Allah in the role of Yahweh. He replaced Jews with Arabs and started telling Bible stories. But being illiterate, or stupid, he got them all fouled up. The Jews laughed themselves silly. Rather than accepting the self-promoting prophet, they teased him for his errant portrayals of their history. But aspiring tyrants never admit to being wrong. Rather than correct his revisionist history, Muhammad claimed supremacy. He said, "If you reject my message, you will die." Emboldened by the militants, he came to a command. He twisted the stories further in an effort to make his wanton behavior look prophetic. Biblical accounts were contorted to the point they became nonsensical in the context of the time and place they actually occurred. The Jews, in defense of their scriptures, mocked Muhammad all the more. Enraged, Allah's messenger struck back, calling them donkeys, apes, and pigs. He ordered his followers to
kill every Jew.
He showed them who was right and who was wrong. He'd prove who was godly and who was not. When you view this continuing saga in that light, and from this perspective, even stories of a talking sun that wears clothing and sets in a muddy spring surrounded by extraterrestrials becomes relevant. And if there's a better excuse, explanation for this malarkey, an alternative view, I'd love to hear it. For if there is something in Islam that makes sense, something that was actually divine, we might use it to reach Muslims, reason with them, and keep them from killing us. By way of confession, I came to see the Bible as the inspired word of Yahweh because of the prophecies it contained. I recognized that it was impossible for a 2,000 to 4,000-year-old book to accurately foretell today's events if it were not authored by a spirit who existed outside of time. You do not have to share my view, however, to understand that Islam disproved itself when it agreed with my conclusion. Two inspired books from the same deity cannot be contradictory to the point of being opposites. Muhammad's dependence on the Bible requires us to compare his text with the original. To understand Islam, we must determine why they are so different. I believe the answer is obvious. Yahweh's Spirit authored one, and Satan inspired the other. Once again, you do not need to agree with me. You may view Muhammad's demonic behavior and the motivation for his deceitful scriptures metaphorically. His demons can be seen as our guttural nature, human depravity in full bloom. It doesn't require a devil to seduce covetous men into deceiving others to gain power, sex, and money. Now for another confession. Any attempt to reorganize Islam chronologically is perilous. The religion was founded upon the claim that Abraham had a religion, that he built the Kaaba and established Islamic rituals. With most of his Quran pilfered from the Torah, or Talmud, Muhammad professed that Adam, Noah, Abraham, Lot, Moses, and Esau, the Islamic Jesus, were Muslim prophets, setting the stage for Islam long before he was born. The longer Muhammad lived, the more he twisted their stories, making them his own. So if I present the evidence in the order Muhammad actually made his assertions, we'd have to jump in and out of history. But if we use a historical timeline, the Islamic version of creation through the twisting of the patriarch, the immorality of Mecca, ending with the violence of Medina, we'll have to review the Quranic scriptures and Islamic hadith that were revealed last first. Tabari and Ishaq, as historian and biographer, use the same chronological approach I am using. Thus, every surah we reference early in our narratives was revealed late in Muhammad's mission. Adam and Satan dominate Islam's genesis, yet none of the supporting Quranic verses are from the first score of surahs in the order of their alleged revelation. I share this to keep you from jumping to the conclusion that Muhammad was a well-schooled religious man, professing a sufficient understanding of the Bible to plagiarize it effectively at the outset of his career. In reality, he would not come to know the Torah or Talmud until he came to know the Jews, and he would never come to understand the New Covenant. We pick up the story of Islam's creation account where we left off, with Iblis, better known as Halal bin Shakar, Satan. I'm going to work the narrative through the Quran. In the 7th surah called
The Wall Between Heaven and Hell,
Allah, or I should say Muhammad, corrupts one of the earliest Genesis stories, but he gets sidetracked with intolerance and terrorism before he dives into his version. So in deference to the Islamic apologists, I'll keep the whole passage in context, starting at the beginning. But before we start, however, you should know that the only reason we can read this or any surah is because an angel or a clanging bell dictated it to Muhammad directly from the memorial tablets, written at Allah's command by the pen before the universe was created.
Quran 7, verse 1. This book,
which by implication is the Quran,
has been sent down to you.
The opening verse is not accurate. The Quran wasn't a book. Based upon the historical record, nothing would be committed to writing or compiled into a book for another century.
Do not hesitate to warn the unbelievers through it.
This warning was not for the unbelievers' benefit or for their salvation. All non-Muslims are predestined to hell. So the threat of impending punishments, which could not be averted, strongly suggests that the author was either demented or a sadist. Muhammad's schizophrenic spirit said,
Quran 7, verse 3, Follow the revelation given to you from your Lord, and follow not as protectors other than Him.
Third person.
Little do you remember my,
spoken in first person singular,
warning. How many towns have we,
now plural,
destroyed as a raid by night? Our punishment took them suddenly while they slept for their afternoon rest. Our terror came to them. Our punishment overtook them. No cry did they utter, but we were wrongdoers.
The Islamic God's taste for terror is shocking. It's hard to fathom Scripture bragging,
How many towns have we destroyed?
Or,
Our punishment took them suddenly while they slept.
What would possess someone to claim this was godly? The Islamic God, by his own admission, is a terrorist. Before we move on, I want to bring your attention to the motivation behind this opening salvo. Muhammad wanted his detractors to know that his God would terrorize anyone who rejected.
Those to whom our message was sent.
That would be Muslims.
Or those by whom we sent it.
That would be Muhammad. It's a warning. If you deny Muhammad, his followers will terrorize you.
Quran 7, verse 7. Verily we shall recount their whole story with knowledge, for we were never absent at any time or place.
Muhammad, speaking on behalf of his spirit, is acknowledging that the stories in the Quran appear